Hello everybody and welcome to Cause and Effect, a show about Vetus. This is the second part of the 8th episode of Season 4, and watch the first part before you watch this part. Today we are talking about law firm decks, and we have come to maybe the second most usual, I don't know if that's right, anyhow, the second most seen law firm crypt, I believe, which is the 4-5 crypt. Isaac, would you like to start us off?
Yeah, the same basic idea as far as the library goes, but here instead you focus on the group 4-5 vampires. That's mainly the Keepers of Tradition vampires. And in this particular deck, it doesn't feature Johannes or Marianne, the two higher caps. This is one of those classic start at 8 cap and go downwards. So we have Ludin, Prince of Chicago, I think. He can prevent 1 each combat. And then you have Graham Gottes man, who's Prince of Miami. Sorry?
I think we should stop a little bit with Ludin. He's a very, very good vampire. Why on them?
Well, for one, he is like the only one in this grouping that has superior in all the disciplines you want. Well, no, not the only one, but the only one if you start at 8.
Yeah.
So that's of course really good, especially if no one else has it. But it's also the prevent 1 damage, which is not only neat. Like the first time you see it, you might think, "Oh, that's a neat special. You can save some blood." But it does impact deck building a bit, actually, because of how we talked about freak drives being extremely expensive if you're being blocked.
Yeah.
With him, it's actually not worse than Majesty, unless the other player plays combat cards, of course. But for all the cases where they don't play combat cards, a freak drive is just as efficient. And that's really interesting, actually, deck building wise.
Yeah. Yeah, over to you, Isaac. Keeping on with the crypt.
We go on Graham Gottes man, just the 7 cap prince, and then Mustafa the Air is 6 cap prince, which is brilliant. This is one of the really neat factors with this deck. As we can see, the whole crypt is titled. It doesn't say Victor Pelletier has a title B, but he actually does. When you bring him up, you pay 2 or 3 pool, and then you get a title.
Yeah,
Mustafa's... Sorry?
I think we should talk a little bit about Victor as well.
Okay.
Probably. Because it's
It is not so much to tell about him. He's a 5 cap that costs 7 or 8 pool, and it comes with a title.
Yeah, but
he's brilliant.
Yeah, but which title should you choose?
Most cases, I think it would suffice with being prince, but you have to take things in consideration because he will automatically yield his title. So if there's any François Villon, or I don't know if there's any viable Sabbat vampire that might fear turning up, or if you fear that Marianne Blair, Lucine, Democritus, any of those. So it's mostly about not contesting. That's the main thing you should have in the back of your head.
Also, parity shift sometimes.
Yeah, because when you pay those 3 pool, you can end up in a situation where you can do an early parity shift because you get to lower pool.
Which is really, really good.
Yeah. Mostly he's strong because he's a 5 cap with a title. That's like the main thing, in my opinion.
Is it a promo card?
Yeah. Yeah. And if you don't have Victor in your collection, I don't think this crypt is viable, actually. I think it's end up being too bad. Anyways, should go on. Mustafa the Air, another prince, 6 cap, is a drawback that all the toreadors can grab his boats.
Yeah.
Which we saw several times in this year's EC finals.
And I've seen it a lot in other games as well. It's just if you know someone playing a toreador, don't bring him up. It will hurt you.
Or at least make a calculated strategic move.
Yeah.
Because if you bring him up and the toreador, he will get bribed and you will lose votes sometimes. But yeah, you have to make a calculation.
Yeah.
And then you have Victor Donaldson, which have some weird special with Golconda that doesn't really matter.
No. But I mean, the main point being, of course, that you have a lower cap.
This is a lot lower average, and every single one is a title vampire. Emily Carson being a Primogen, which is not great, but 1 vote's better than 0. So in some cases. So you end up with a crypt where you can have that mid-cap sidekick I talked about earlier, but that mid-cap sidekick actually have votes, which is brilliant. And you can make the crypt even more diverse, like trade one Emily for something else, and then you have an even more diverse crypt if you really want to.
Okay, this deck does not include Mary Ann, which I think is a little bit strange because it's such a good vampire. What do you think about that, Isaac?
I think she's not as good as she looks. And that may
do you mean she looks good? Like the picture?
You got a crush?
Yeah, you like her?
Oh, come on, you guys. You're consciously misinterpreting me.
Oh no! Okay.
God damn it!
Well, what do you mean when it says she's not as good as she looks?
But you see the special, it's like, oh my god, that's broken. That's the reaction. But when you do build a law firm around her, it's end up being really awkward. Really awkward. Because then you have a 10 cap, and then it's like, should I have crypt acceleration? Yeah, I should probably have that. Then you have a law firm, which is this really intense card cycling machine, and then you end up with like 5 Zillah's Valley on your hand, and you've just done 2 actions.
Yeah.
And then you get up with just really bad hand jams. So then you end up in, okay, let's not have crypt acceleration, then go from there. And then you, turn 3 or 4, get this girl out, and the first thing you do is do her special, then you get blocked. And then you do Majesty, and then you go do Governor Spirit, then you get blocked. And then it's game over, because in the long term, you need those 5 counters in your uncontrolled. Otherwise, you have like Johannes, or best case scenario, you have Ludin, and that takes 2 turns to bring up. Or possibly 3 in Johannes' case. And then you get up with really slow deck that, yeah, it gets really awkward. So it doesn't really matter which way you go with the weird crypt acceleration, end up being really awkward. And that's why I think the brilliance of this crypt is the low average of the time titled vampires.
Do you agree, Adam?
Yes, I agree. But there's another reason as well. Is if you think, okay, I'm gonna build a law firm, Marianne Blair law firm, you might be tempted to play a lot of freak drives to make a lot of the government actions and scout mission.
Yeah.
But I don't think that many freak drives is actually like. Sure, you can get a lot of vampires out, but the rest of the deck, like the later phases of the game, when you're not transferring, that deck becomes a lot like noticeably worse at ousting because of all the freak drives and all the enchant kindreds and scouting missions and what have you that you've included to make their Marianne Blair engine work. And of course, if you don't include the extra freak drives, her special does not have a huge impact. Yeah. And then the reasons Isaac listed are like huge factors.
But it seems to me if you build it with more freak drives, and you have Ludin as well, as we talked about, that utilize freak drives more, why not?
Yeah, but it's still, you can't. It's not good to include like 15 to 20 freak drives. And sure, if you play like a regular law firm with say 8 to 10 freak drives, yeah, you can use her special and get some extra vampires out a bit faster. But then I think the reasons Isaac listed are relevant. Then it's like it's 10 cap, and yeah, if you don't get those actions through, you're actually kind of dead in the water. If someone musters 2 blocks and 1 intercept that early, so yeah.
And that's not unreasonable in any way. We're talking turn. You bring her up turn 3, so you start acting turn 4 or 5, and getting blocked twice, 1 intercept in turn 4 or 5 is to be expected.
Yeah. Okay. So
the brilliance with this script is the low average of the title vampires. that is like for me the most defining factor for this script. Because when you start looking at the disciplines, you don't have that really neat balance. It's such a harmony with the balance with the disciplines in group 1 and 2, and this is just horrible. It's like you have some guys with superior fortitude. You only have the one guy with all superiors. Some have superior presence. Some, just Emily and Victor Donaldson, only have superior dominate. So you have a really tough time multi-acting with those. Victor only have superior presence. It's like it's gonna be really awkward when you start to try to do this multi-act thing. With the group 1-2, it's like you have one guy with inferior dominate that just omits the possibility to do superior govern with him. That's Timothy Crowley, and he's a 7 cap, so you can work around that. But you have such an harmony in group 1-2 that's completely wiped off in group 4-5. Here you have the cheapness and the speed. That's your strengths.
Adam, in your opinion, should you use more, feature more vote cards in this deck than in the group 1-2 because of those reasons?
No, I would actually argue less vote cards. Because I think the effect of having the lack of breadth that in the discipline spread, I think the effect of that makes it so that you multi-act less.
Okay.
That's like the concrete effect. And if you multi-act less, you need to do less, either less bleed or less votes. And I think it's less card intensive to bleed. So in my experience, you're gonna bleed more with this deck than with another law firm deck.
Okay. Yeah, so moving on, the master package then, Adam.
Yeah, sure. It's straightforward. You have the same 2/2/2 with Anti-Troublemaker, Misdirection, and Pentix as the last deck. It does have 4 dreams instead of just 1, and I can imagine this actually working as crypt acceleration fairly often, because it's just a 70 card deck, and every now and again you can get the second turn Grahab, or I don't know, maybe even
first turn Victor.
second turn Ludin if you're positioned 3rd. So I think it does have actual crypt acceleration potential in this deck. It gives you every now and again extra actions.
Yeah.
So that's kind of neat. Of course, having lots of dreams can still be contested.
Of course, then if you draw dreams early on and have Victor in your crypt, you can do early on. What's it called?
Parity shift?
Yeah, parity shift, which we talked about, which is great.
Yes. It's also kind of an aggressive way of opening.
What?
What?
You get to play less governed superiors, and
yeah.
People might be a bit like wary of you for the rest of the game because you've been so aggressive.
But
so it's like a short-term choice, I think.
It's mostly the missing superior govern, I think, because one thing that this deck do have is like the 7 cap and the 8 cap, both of them have superior dominate. So if you draw Ludin, he can do superior govern. If you draw Groth, when you don't draw him, you maybe have Graham, and then he can do the governing. And then you're probably kind of fine on the governor's superior front.
Yeah, but you... Okay. But in those cases, you don't draw them. Which is...
That's 4 vampires out of 12. It's...
93%. What is that? 93% chance of drawing one of them?
No, 70 something.
70, okay.
I think.
But if you don't do that, you're gonna draw Victor Donaldson.
Yeah.
It's not 100%, of course, but Victor Donaldson can govern to both Emily and Victor Pelletier, so you can still get a few governed superiors off.
Yeah.
Another card which is featured in this deck is Hostile Takeover.
Yes, which is a weird card.
Which is a weird card.
Should I, or should Isaac talk about.
Isaac, you can talk about it. Adam, you can bring it up.
Yes.
I don't know what to say. You can steal vampires. That's awesome. But in most cases, you don't end up stealing vampires. In most cases, you play that, you choose a vampire, and you try to make that Methuselah pay as much pool as possible. So it's more or less like master direct damage. Or at least that's how I play it. I rarely try to steal something, because most vampires with a capacity of 6 or less is not worth that much pool to you to pay for. Sure, you pay 1 pool for master, then you pay 2 pool together. That's just awesome. But most cases, you just try to make your prey pay pool to lose pool. On the other hand, you can buy some vampire just to lower your pool to be able to play Perishift. There's a lot of options. Or you can take some really troublesome blocker that has a sport bike, a ball convenience, and a magnum, and just like, that's mine. Give me Zoe.
I paid 10 pool for the Tremere Antitribu, which has that mage effect.
Antonio?
Yeah, Antonio. The other day. I lost that game though, but
you felt like a god.
Yeah, I felt like it was a good move. It wasn't. Anyhow, yeah, Adam, do you have anything?
Yeah, it's like something that you like can happen when you play this card is that someone else cross table gets the vampire and they give a lot of pull to your prey. Of course, given that you play the colossal takeover for your prey, and that can be really, really bad if
you don't have Perishift.
If you don't have Perishift, or just that player might die. I don't know. It can backfire quite a lot if you aren't like trying to predict what people will be bidding and stuff. So that's like a pitfall of the card.
Yeah.
But this card doesn't it have like a lot of in common with Temptation of Greater Power?
I think the most important part is that you give the pool to the original controller, and that's like a really big detriment to playing it, because you want to play it for your prey and make him go into a lose-lose situation.
Yeah.
But with this card, it's not necessarily a lose-lose situation, because he'll get some pool if someone else but him pays for the vampire. So yeah, it's not as strong, but yeah, I think the best use is, as Isaac says, to use it just to make your prey burn pool. You bid some token amount that your prey will most likely pay over, and then he burns, say, 3 or 4 pool. I think that's the best use.
Okay. You talked a little bit about modernizing the law firm when we talked about the group 1 and 2. Here, one example which you said was the heart initiatives. This deck features 3 heart initiatives. Why, and why is that good on them?
Well, first off, the reason why I said modernizing is that because this is actually kind of common in a lot of decks nowadays. To include 3 heart initiatives. For the longest time, the heart initiatives was a one-off card that you included, and it was nice when you got it. But it's getting increasingly common that people play it like this, and I think it's good because of what heart initiatives is. It is a card cycling card, so if you play your first one, you can hide away the remaining ones. It's not like a huge logical leap. I'm sure a lot of people realized this when the card was released, but I haven't actually seen it played that much until very recently. And I think it's an interesting twist, and it can be done in a lot of decks. I think it's in this deck especially because you have some multi-act, and if your first vampire has bled and voted, it's nice to have a third action if you got blocked, just to have something to do with the last action. You don't have to stay untapped unnecessarily.
And yeah, of course, I think it's really good with this kind of deck that really relies on the cycling of cards because you multi-act.
Yeah, and fits together with the theme of dreams, that you have this mentality that I want to get rid of cards, and that's very apparent when you look at the library, that you're allowed to have your Heart of Nature just a few turns, and you're allowed to have dreams 1 or 2 times. because they're so action modifiers plus combat cards. That's 28 cards in 70. That's over a third. So that's a big part of the deck.
Yeah.
That isn't pool damage. And among those modifiers, there's only 4 conditioning. So I think that's really important. The card cycling stuff.
And another card which don't see a lot of airtime or playtime is the Bitter and Sweet Story. Isak.
I think that's a waste of card space. If you want cards, Dreams and Heart, I think is enough. It's just take a long time before you actually do get something. It's very rarely you get it exactly at the moment you get your first point. You also help some other cross table.
Yeah, it's a little bit risky of playing it without having a VP, because someone else can.
Yeah, but you have to play it because you need to get rid of it.
Yeah.
And if you're not going to play it, you're going to discard it. Then you don't need it in the first place.
Yeah.
I think you have to have an even more aggressive. The only decks I've seen this that I felt like intuitively right is the Presence Weenies.
I think that's because nowadays the deck that gets the first victory point, that idea of a deck, it's not a unique thing. Every single deck that is competitive nowadays can get a fast victory point. It's not. You can play any kind of deck. You just like, okay, I'll get a victory point at round 5, and that's not weird. The only one who can actually one up the regular decks is the Presence Weenie, for instance. And I think that's a required idea in a deck to make Bitter and Sweet Story worth it, because as you say, other people might benefit from it.
But not a Kindred Spirits Weenie.
Sure, yeah, Kindred Spirits Weenie would be. I don't think it's as powerful or as fast as a Presence Weenie, but sure, Bitter and Sweet Story could be fine in a Kindred Spirit Weenie as well.
I played this. The only time I actually played this card was when I built my Lucian the Perfect Monster Bleed deck.
Yeah,
it worked okay.
Yeah, but that's the thing. I think it's okay because it's not. You don't increase your hand flow by 2, because most people, or a lot of people will read this as you will have a better card flow after you draw this card. Now this is a one-time thing that you get some additional cards on your hand, but after that you're down to your normal pace. This only after the initial draw 2 cards, you're down to I can save more cards for later.
Yeah.
So a Dreams that you actually discard each turn and then use it again to draw 2 new cards is actually better for card flow, that is. This allows you to save cards for the future. So, in most cases, in a Presence Weenie, having those 2 extra cards after victory point can be the one thing that allows you to get the next point, because that's a really, really tight deck, and it can be just, I need 1 misdirection, that's all I need, and if you get to draw 2 extra cards for the next turn, blah blah blah. But in most cases, that's just, it's like having extra space in your storage area. You're happy once you get it, but just you can store more stuff. You can't.
But I think the biggest argument against the Bitter and Sweet Story is that you have included it in your deck, and the other players have not. And if they benefit from it as well, you're using your own resources to at best create a equal increase in power.
Yeah.
Of course, they are going to end up on top in that situation because they get benefit from it as well.
Well, but I mean, it could also have a huge effect. I mean, if you get 4+ hand size, doesn't really affect your game, doesn't it?
It's if that moment when you draw those 2 cards, yes, then you increase card flow. But after that, and from that point on, if you don't include cards, say like Deal with the Devil, but you don't, so then it's just storage. But that one is fixed. It says 5 cards or something, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But from that point on, it's just storage. that means you can save for a launch. But this isn't really a launch deck. Sure, there are moments when you will stop and you're just like, okay, I'll give them another turn because it benefits me. There are some of those, but you don't like save up for the launch. In that way, you try to be constant.
Okay.
Try to put pressure on.
I don't know if we touched that subject already, Adam, but in my notes here I have bleed/vote question, so I will direct this to you. Bleed/votes in this deck?
Yeah, we kind of talked about it when you asked me about crypt.
Yeah.
And I said that I felt in this specific crypt, because it's a little bit harder to multi-act, it's better to include less votes. And we do see that here. It's 13 vote cards. On the other hand, the previous deck was an 84 card with 13. Yeah. So maybe the ratios are kind of similar. But it's something that kind of organically appears when you create a law firm deck, is that you get your own ratio between bleed and vote. And I haven't played enough law firm, or am not omniscient enough to say that some specific ratio is the best, but it is a fact when you're playing a law firm deck that you should think about, or you will have a specific ratio of how much you're bleeding and how much you're voting.
Yeah. And that might be individual as well, I believe. Just
yeah, of course.
Getting the feel of your deck and your type and how you play the deck because of the different aspects of the deck and the multi-act. It's really kind of personal.
But one thing that's is the difference between voting and bleeding is that bleeding costs more blood. Of course, it does more damage as well. But yeah, so if you're voting more, you need less blood gain.
Yeah.
If you're bleeding more, you need more blood gain. That's logically imperative.
Is there any difference between the strategy of playing this deck compared to the group 1 and 2, Isaac?
Yeah. I think you have. Yeah, I think you need to be a. This might sound harsh, but I think you need to be a little smarter when you play this deck in one way, because you have a more unforgiving crypt when it comes to disciplines. You have to be in a bigger way aware of which vampire has which discipline as superiors. So who am I going to save my majesties for? Who am I going to save my freak drives for? Etc. Etc. You follow?
Yeah.
So it's more like in the details, who's doing what in which order and what cards I'm going to draw, like the next 5 cards.
Depending on what you have in your ash heap and such.
But in this card, in this deck, I think it's also really important to try to discard and use cards so that you can get your first heart. Because I think that this deck, since they're so dedicated to get the heart, you should get it as early as possible to actually get some extra mileage out of it. But and one thing is really surprising is there's no mind numps.
Yeah, that is kind of weird.
Yeah. But I think that's if any a sign of the meta. It's probably a non-high cap meta.
Also, in some metas, misdirections and troublemakers, etc., are more powerful. If people defend against the misdirection, it might be beneficial to include a mind numb to get 2 guys, for instance.
So do you mean include more sudden reversal and wash, or
stay untapped with 2 guys?
2, yeah.
If you're, it's a deck building kind of thing as well to defend against misdirections, and if the meta doesn't have that kind of deck building practices, mind numb is not as useful, I find.
Okay.
Yeah, but something about what Isaac said as well is that the deck size of this deck is significantly lower. It's 14 cards less in this deck, and I think that has this effect as well, that you need to play a bit more smart. Yeah. Because you do waste some action cards because it's a law firm, you get blocked. But I don't think you can waste too much with this specific deck, because then you won't have enough cards to win the game.
Yeah, as Isaac said, or maybe like the dreams are probably not only for discarding cards, but for crypt acceleration as well, because otherwise you will just draw out your library really fast, I believe.
Yes.
I'm sorry.
But of course, yeah, a tighter library makes you a bit faster, a bit more aggressive, so it is possible to win a game a bit faster with a tighter library as well.
Yeah. Any thoughts before we go on to our next deck? Anyone?
No.
No.
No! Okay. Then should we talk about probably the one we see the least of the law firm decks in the different crypts, which is the 3-4 crypt.
Yes.
Isaac, why don't we see this as much?
Because it's so bad compared to the other twos. It really is. I mean, it's bad in comparison. It's not like bad in an objective sense of the word.
Okay.
And there's some things that I don't agree with when it comes to crypt choice in this deck, but basically you have the princess, which Victor, Pelletier, and Mustafier we recognize from the 4-5 group, but we have some new ones as well. Victorine Lafourcade is basically this group's Emerson Bridges or Ludin or some such. She has some sort of special ability which is useful, I think.
Just make bleeds from capacity less than 5 fail by burning the edge.
Yeah,
but I think the most important one is the press.
Yeah.
Oh.
So she's good against like grinders and animalism and such things like that.
Grapple.
Though you have the Majesty, so most of the cases it doesn't really matter, I think.
Grapple is actually a really big. Because
yeah.
she can take the punch. Like maybe she survives one punch and then you press against the grapple and you're fine.
Yeah.
But true. If you expect a lot of grapple, can you play charismatic aura?
No. Auspex.
Auspex, yeah, that's Auspex as well. Yeah, I thought. Yeah. So.
Denying Aphrodite's favor.
What's that?
Go ahead, Isaac. I'm just being stupid.
Yes, you are. Stop with that. Okay, we have Johannes Kirschenstein, 9-cap. Really, it's a strong special. Basically, it says if someone plays delaying tactics, they have to pay 2 pool, which is fucking brilliant. But it's a 9-cap, which is not that cool. Which is like really uncool. It's like being the host of the world's only Vitus TV show.
But he has superior dementation, which is cool.
Yeah, but also unusable. Oh, and then we have Horatio Ballard, which is a really bad vampire. It's a 7-cap.
This is a funny crypt.
It's a 7-cap that can call a vote to become Prince of Chicago. Which, if you have vote lock, doesn't matter because then you don't need to call that vote. And if you don't have vote lock, no one will vote in favor. So it's really good.
Also compare to Sir Walter Nash.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like same cap, same disciplines, no title.
Yeah.
What?
And then we have Mukhtar Bey, which is brilliant because he's a Prince Caitiff, but he lacks Dominate. So it's really bad for that. From that perspective.
Yeah.
Then you have some sidekick, Edward Vignes being brilliant, Boss Kalian having a drawback that says he can't rescue other vampires from torpor, actually being, this is a standing joke in Sweden, that actually isn't a drawback, that's something good. It's a good special, because you can't be tricked into rescuing people across table, you can save your blood for later. And then, last but not least, we have Michael Luther, which is the one saving grace, I would say, for this script.
Oh.
Because Michael Luther is really, really strong. You can tap him to cancel the vote of a Camarilla vampire.
Change votes, even.
Change, which is even more ridiculous. This is so strong. Because if you are vote locked with a virtual law firm, I dare say 99 cases out of 10 there's a Camarilla vampire vote locking you.
And maybe even 99% inner circle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he ends up...
Lutz is gonna be on the table, man.
To put it shortly, yes.
So he ends up being the best possible Ventral Headquarters.
Yeah.
It's really, really strong vampire. You could probably double up on him. It's really strong. But this is a really awkward crypt. The core is fine. Victorine Lafourcade, Mostafa the Air, and Victor Petier, they're okay vampires. It's like they're decent, but these other ones, Johannes, Horatio, Mukhtar Bey, not so cool. And that's where this deck draws short. It ends up 3 or 4 slots in the crypt ends up being really awkward.
So, just before we go on with the deck, Adam, why would you play this crypt if it's so obviously subpar to the rest of them?
Why indeed? No, I think the reason is that the mid-caps, or the smaller vampires, are a bit better than group 1-2. And you get more presence than the 4-5 crypt. And presence is, as we talked about, the better multi-acting. Fortitude is good as well, but you only need that inferior, really. You don't need superior fortitude. So, if you want to be non-critical, which is actually really, really hard with this crypt, I think you should focus on those 2 points.
Yeah, and Michael Luther.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, and one of the mid-caps, which are a lot better.
Yeah, but it's really good to have this crypt that you have this much superior presence. But then on the other hand, when you look at the 1-2 crypt, you end up with basically the same amount of presence. So there are few saving graces, but also one of these things you're just like, I want to do a group 3-4 law firm, and then you go ahead and do it. It's like it's still a law firm, so it will not perform super bad.
Well, one thing I think. So if you compare the 3 best vampires from group 1-2, it's Emerson, Timothy Crowley, and Sir Walter Nash. 8-7-7. Victorine, Mustafa, and Victor are 8-6-5. 8-6-5 is obviously better. So
except you get worse disciplines, and you don't get. You have one that is in common all 3. Yeah.
But I actually do prefer these. Mustafa, oh, not for Mustafa's drawback is really huge actually.
Yeah.
But glossing over Mustafa's drawback, I do. I'm taking huge. What's it called? Freedoms, liberties here.
Yeah.
I think 8-6-5. These 3 are better than Emerson, Sir Walter Nash, and Timothy Crowley. Obviously, the remaining 6 vampires.
But I don't agree with you. Mustafa's drawback is too big.
But still, it's only big if there actually is. If Anson is on the table, which of course he kind of often is, but.
I'd say there's a Toreador, like 1 table out of 3.
Yeah, and that's Anson.
Yes.
Yeah, or some other Toreador.
Yeah.
Rafael de Corazon or what have you, not, but.
Yeah.
I agree.
But I agree with you. If we're at a non-Toreador table, the core of the crypt is brilliant.
Yeah. And of course, Michael Luther is brilliant as well.
But I need to say it once again. I don't actually think these are better than.
Yes, you just said you thought that were better. We are going to put that on the internet, and people will know what you think.
No, my reputation.
Oh no! So, glossing over the crypt. What's the difference in this deck or library than the other ones, Adam?
There are, I think the most glaring differences are in the action package. That's like where it's very different.
Yeah.
Not only does it include 4 entrancement, that might be a meta choice, but instead of having, say, 8 or 9 governs, there are 2 governs, as well as 5 enchant kindred and 3 4th edition. Yeah. And I think that's just a necessity from the crypt.
Reflecting the non-dominating dominate.
Yeah, exactly.
Ah, yeah, I just said that. Sorry, go on.
I was trying to. Okay. No, it's just it's not anything complicated. Just the action package looks really different because of the crypt. But yeah, it does mean that you're a bit worse at bleeding since you have only 2 +2 bleed actions. And while it might not seem that huge, it means that you might very often get to bleed for 4 instead of 5 or 6.
Yeah. But do you save a little bit of blood with this deck then?
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, you do, but you also lose a little bit of VPs, so...
lose as many VPs as the blood you gain.
But the one thing that we should really look at, it's the obvious, we have the Euro Stealth package, but I think the obvious thing we should talk about as coming up right here in 1 second is the uncoilings. And the uncoilings together with entrancement and together with me actually being at this tournament tells me that this deck is built to be able to deal with ally decks. 4 entrancements and 2 uncoilings just screams, I do not want shambling hordes up my Bombardier.
But the entrancement I think is mostly meta, like if you know or if you fear some allies. But the uncoiling should be in every law firm, in my opinion.
Yeah, because
because if there is an ally deck, you can't oust that ally deck unless you draw uncoiling and play it. More or less, that's the case.
And there's also some other event cards which are not that comfortable.
But shouldn't you? Is it worse to include strike combatants and allies can't block card?
Force of personality.
Yeah, force of personality.
Uncoiling feels like a more permanent solution, in my opinion. And force of personality gets really bad when you don't face allies.
Yeah.
It gets really bad. Because, okay, you get blocked and then you... while just strike combatants, no untap. End of actions, end of days, your turn.
Uncoiling is a better solution for allies, but it's also a decent solution for some other things. So it's like, if you want to include silver bullets, it's better to have a silver bullet which catches more things.
Yeah, of course, the...
Amphibious, for instance.
Narrow minds.
Narrow minds. Yeah.
You also see here what we talked a little bit about earlier, the Prince Wake. Which...
Yeah, but this, since we just said that this deck doesn't waste as much blood because your bleed actions, most of them are free of charge. You have more leftover blood, so you can afford doing the second tradition thing. But also there's a coven and 3 vessels.
And I think the vessels are kind of brilliant. I like that a lot. It's a blood gain as well as fuels parity shifting.
Yeah.
And I think now I know the vessels in this deck are for transferring pool to blood.
Yeah.
It's not the other way around. And that's blood gain, which is also a trifle blood gain, but it also fuels parity shifting. So I think that's really smart.
And as we can see in the vote package, we'll compare these 3 law firms. This is the most parity shift heavy of the 3 of them. The other 2 had 3 respectively, 4.
Yeah.
4 and 3 respectively. And also it's another thing that makes me think that there's some meta choices that involves a lot of allies and weakness and stuff like that is 2 domain challenges.
Yeah.
And it's really one of those cards that seldom fall or often fall just outside your immediate, like these cards can I use with great effect, because you can to a big extent decide how much pool damage yourself would suffer.
Yeah.
At the minimum you suffer 1 pool damage, but with law firms you can end up with 5 minions in play, and then Anarchist Uprising doesn't really end up being a viable option. Sure, you can take 2 or 3 damage from Anarchist Uprising, I think, and that would be okay. But the main challenge, it also gets brilliant because when you start bleeding and then you do Majesty and then you do next action and stuff like that, you will end up having your prey tapped out very often. And especially if you also put the misdirections and a troublemaker into accounting.
Yeah, it seems really brilliant when we think about it.
Yeah.
And it's one of the cards, well, as I talked about earlier, how you can do a lot of damage and like get lots of victory points in a few actions. This is one of the cards that can do the most damage in the entire game with one action.
Yeah.
Like, can do a total of 20 damage across multiple opponents.
So another card which is featured in this deck, but not in any one of the others, I believe, is the Dark Influences, Isaac.
I think that's just of those trend cards. I really don't see a huge benefit for it. Sure, Dark Influences can be cool. You Dark Influence the first thing you see, and then you're immune to DIs on your Freak Drives. But this is not a Freak Drive heavy deck, so it's like... seems very costly, both in terms of opportunity cost, but also in like pool cost, to be immune to the first DI against a Freak Drive of yours. So, I just think that's the trend. This deck won again rather soon after the release of Keeps a Tradition.
Okay, but the Dark Influences is worth to include in your multi-act decks in general, which feature a lot of Freak Drives on them.
Worth it? That's a harder question to answer, because for Freak Drive decks, and this deck in particular, are, as we talked about, very... it cycles a lot of cards. So having extraneous cards in a deck which already cycles a lot of cards is can be really bad. But it does protect you from DIing Freak Drives, and DIing Freak Drives is one of the most powerful ways to use a DI. Yeah. So it's a defense against that. It's not necessarily worth it. I can't answer that. I never include Dark Influences, for instance. But of course, if I haven't never done that, maybe I don't have as much experience with it. But I think that's like the specific reason why it's really good. Yeah. And of course, nowadays, if we face a lot of Animalism Nana decks, Dark Influencing Deep Songs can be nice.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how often that will happen. It's just one card, and it's just that one round where it has to be in hand. I don't know.
Yeah, because when this was released, we talked about a lot about Dark Influencing Governed Unaligned. That didn't really work out that good. Or?
No, well, the one that you want to disallow from playing Governed Unaligned is your Predator, because that's what killed you.
Yeah.
But it's equally bad if that player decides to just bleed you with conditioning.
Yeah.
Of course, his game will be ruined because he didn't get his Govern Superior, but you still die. So DIing the Governs, it's like, it's gonna be bad for you no matter what happens.
Yeah.
It's not worth to include Dark Influences to not affect the game.
Okay, so strategy-wise, there seems to be a lot of difference between this decks and theirs. I mean, comparison to the different the 4-5 and what's it, 4-5? Yeah, the 4-5.
Which
and
are you talking about? The 4-5?
No, 1-2. No, I mean, yeah, no, like I think there's some differences strategy-wise with playing this one than the 1 and 2 and 4 and 5 because of the more prominent featuring of the Prince vote, which takes
Paired Shift.
Yeah, Paired Shift. Sorry. Am I right about that?
Maybe, I don't know. I find it really weird that, for instance, the group 4-5 hasn't switched the Paired Shift kind ratio around, so it's 6 Paired Shifts. I'm really surprised that this 83 card high cap law firm only plays 3 Paired Shifts. So for me, the bare minimum is playing like 4 or 5 Paired Shifts on 70 cards or somewhere in that area. So I don't think it's too low in the Brazilian deck. I think that's okay. 4 in 70, but 3 in 83 in the Swedish deck is really low.
Okay.
Because I think you need, and the reason for that is not that you think that you will play 5 parachutes throughout the game. You'll probably only end up playing 2 or 3, and one of them being for 2 pool in duel. But it's that you want that first parachute for 5 as early as possible.
Okay, Adam, do you see any difference in the strategy-wise playing this deck compared to the other ones?
I would imagine this one is a bit more grinderish. It does more attrition damage because it has it has 1 less misdirection, 1 less anti-troublemaker. So it doesn't have that I can launch this turn as well as next turn. It can't do that because it doesn't have as many of those masters.
Yep.
The 2 previous decks we've seen has more of the masters, so they're more loungy. This one I feel is probably more grindy. If those are words.
Yeah, and you can see that in a higher reaction package and more parachutes. And you have the vessels which you can do pool game with. You don't want to do that, but you can if you need to.
Yeah.
So you're more in the mindset of being able to be staying alive, being able to be defensive.
Yeah.
Defensive.
Okay. Anything else about this this deck before we move on?
No.
Just these proportions of Freak Drives versus Majesty is ones I like a lot more.
Which is?
It's 9 Majesty and 6 Freak Drives in this deck.
Yeah.
I like that more than in the previous decks, simply for the reasons I stated in part 1.
Yeah. Okay, well, moving on. What other types of law firms are they? There.
The basic engine of a law firm being voting and bleeding plus multi-act via being blocked. You can do that with a lot. You can do that with Guhuri. Seen one of the Swedish players do that. I've seen it with Ishtari. You, Anders, have played that. I've seen. I think that's the non-Ventru. You can do.
I know one.
Ventru. You can do law firm style stuff with Bruya and Toreador as well.
Adam?
Yeah. Bond with the Mountain and Gargoyles and Tree Mirrors.
Can you put up Bond with the Mountain?
Yes.
Okay. you have to explain this because this is very non-intuitive.
Yes. So yeah, Bond with the Mountain is kind of like Majesty for Visceratica, the Gargoyle discipline. And if you have a Tree Mirror who does a bleed action, you get blocked, you can use the Slave rule for one of your Gargoyles, and then the Gargoyle plays Bond with the Mountain to end combat and untap. And then your Tree Mirror is untapped as well, and he can or she can vote instead. And if that vampire is blocked, you can do the same thing again and play another Bond with the Mountain. So it's like a Bond with the Mountain law firm, with Bond with the Mountain instead of Majesty. It requires to have a Gargoyle in play as well as probably Path of Servitude to decrease the cost. There is an option to play it with Top Dogs as well. Top Dogs and Tremere Anti. And the Top Dogs pay 1 less for Bond with the Mountain.
Huh.
But then you end up with a law firm that doesn't play Parachute.
Yes. So hopefully, if Dance Macabre is good and you get some better votes, you can play them, the Trimmer Anti, with new vote cards, maybe.
Oh, that would be brilliant. This law firm is very cool. If you have like Bloodlines rare cards lying around in stacks, build this deck. It's brilliant. It's not better than a law firm, I'd say, but it's a lot cooler.
And you can, of course, threaten and include aggravated cards.
Yes.
Which are cool.
You can shave a voucher.
Why would you do that?
Okay, so I mean, just the basic engine of bleeding and voting and playing untap strike competence. It's the main thing of the law firm. It's worked out great. You can do it a lot of different styles.
Access to presence is usually the key, but as we saw, this Gratica works fine as well.
Works.
Okay. I feel done.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
So we will leave you with these kind words of play the game or something. I don't even know what I'm talking about. Okay. Yeah, I'm on it. Okay, that's it for this time. Thanks everyone for watching, and remember if you have any thoughts, comments, or ideas, you can post them on our Facebook page or send an email to the address below, which is causeampersandeffect@gmail.com. Remember to like us on Facebook, subscribe to our YouTube account, and after the show we will post a thread on beacon.net where you can continue the discussion. So have a good life. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.